Hello everyone, I warmly welcome you to my presentation on two studies that highlight the importance of multiple information studies for evidence-based school development. The main research question that we focus in our presentation today is to what extent do raters differ in their evaluation on, for instance, school quality or teaching quality. Why is the research question of relevance? Well, valid data is needed as basis of informed decisions in different areas, for instance, in educational policy or in professional teacher development or in diagnosis of school and teaching quality, and so forth. But how can we get valid data? The validity of the data depends on many aspects. One relevant aspect is, of course, the data collection process. This process is influential in whether data is valid or not. There are at least two aspects that are relevant. First, who are the informants that we get the data, the information from? School quality and teaching quality can be assessed by serving different stakeholders, teachers, students, school leaders, parents, and so on. The ratings of these groups often differ. In that case, we either talk about measurement error or about perspective validity. Reasons for these different perspectives, these different ratings, can be found in theories like the socio-ecological theory by Braunfenbrenner or the theory of social cognitive theory by Bandura. Another aspect that is of importance is the multi-level structure of the data. School and teaching quality can be captured by serving stakeholders at different levels. As educational systems have multiple levels, data can be either collected at the individual level or at the group level. Social and socio-ecological theories postulate that different factors at multiple levels within the school system influence each stakeholder's perception of, for instance, school or teaching quality. There are several reasons that explain this variation in informant ratings. I will briefly mention some of them, but not all of them. First, there might be role-specific, socially desirable response tendencies, depending on the position of the rater. Different informants display different social desired responses. In the literature, this is known as wishful thinking or as cheerleading effect. For instance, school leaders more often report more positive values about the quality of their schools because, of course, they are in charge of their school. In contrast, teachers might be more objective. Another reason is the role-specific knowledge. Different informants each have role-specific knowledge and expertise due to their specific position in the system, making them two experts in their domains. For instance, teachers, of course, do have higher knowledge about teaching content, about teaching material than their students do. Finally, role-specific situations and conditions make a difference. For instance, school leaders act under pressure as they are accountable for the quality of their school. Teachers, in contrast, are in a more comfortable situation and thus might give other ratings. There are many other theoretical reasons that explain why we might expect different ratings from different domains. When looking at the existing literature and research findings, we can observe that studies comparing evaluations of school quality are scarce. But those existing point to low agreement between school leaders and teachers. In contrast, there are many more studies examining the differences between students and teachers' evaluations on teaching quality. These studies too point to low agreement between these two informant groups. Our aim is to extend the existing literature and research, particularly with regard to school quality dimensions. To do so, we conducted two different studies. I will start with the one that focused on the dimensions of school quality. Here is some information on the sample and variables collected. We did collect cross-sectional data with a hierarchical structure by means of an online survey. This survey was part of a larger study on school development in Germany. 120 school leaders did take part, and also about 1,500 school members, mainly teachers. We did collect information on 7 different dimensions of school quality, for instance, collective teacher efficacy, cooperation among teachers, and satisfaction with the school. The number of items for these dimensions varies between 4 to 10. With regard to the design and the analytical approach of the study, we did focus, as mentioned in the introduction, on the multi-level structure, but also on measurement invariance between the two informant groups and between the two levels. Regarding the multi-level approach, one relevant question is the appropriate level of analysis. As Littke and colleagues argue that the appropriate level depends on the research question, it's important to ask whether effects of the context of the environment or effects of the individual, its characteristics are of interest. In our case, we are interested in effects of context features, and thus the relevant level, the appropriate level of analysis is the school level, level 2 shown in the figure. As we have two informant groups, we did make sure that our instruments did work the same way, both for teachers and school leaders, but also at level 1 and level 2 at the individual and at the context level. That's why we did measurement invariance, and we focused, as usual, on configurable metric and scalar measurement invariance. All the models did fit well, and so I go straight forward to the results. This figure shows the differences between the latent means of the two informant groups, that is, teachers and school leaders, for all of the dimensions of school quality that we assessed. The differences of the latent means are expressed by Cohen's d effect sizes. We can see a quite large variability. There are high effect sizes, with some even larger than 1 for the dimension cohesion within the teaching staff. And then there are also very low effect sizes, for instance, for parents' perspective on school quality. In all cases, as expected, school leaders did report on average higher ratings than, more positive ratings than school staff members did. Moving to the next slide, latent correlations between the school leaders' ratings and the ratings from the staff at the corresponding school are reported. Again, we can see the highest agreement is observed regarding parents' perspective on school quality. The ratings regarding teachers' collective efficacy have the lowest correlation between school leader ratings and teacher ratings. In total, the correlations vary between 0.2 and 0.7. I will proceed with study 2, in which we question whether the predictive validity of students' learning during COVID-19 differs depending on the informant group used. We have, again, cross-sectional data. The data was collected via online questionnaire at the end of the first lockdown in 2020 in Germany and Austria. The sample is an ad hoc sample, and unfortunately it was not possible to link the different groups, so we cannot make use of the hierarchical structure in the data. The first group is students. We have about 300 students and 500 parents and 500 teachers. We did use questionnaires for all respondent groups that were formulated in the same way to assess 11 different dimensions that are deemed relevant for students learning during distance education. For instance, we asked for perceived self-organization skills of the students, perceived parental support during distance learning, and perceived students' achievements during distance learning. We used for each of the dimensions 2 to 4 items. Regarding the analytical approach, we did a two-step approach within the single level framework. First, we did estimate latent correlations among the study variables. We used that latent correlations to calculate relative weights when predicting perceived student achievement. We did so instead of using traditional regressions because these led to inadmissible solutions due to multicollinearity problems. I won't go into the details of relative weight analysis, but I will straightforward go to the findings. On this slide you can see the relative weights for each of the 11 dimensions. On the x-axis, percentage values are reported for the relative weights. So that is then the variance explained. On the top we can see the total variance explained when predicting perceived students' achievement during the first lockdown. Each of the bars represents a different group, so you can see the differences. We can see, for instance, that using teachers and parents' data, we can explain about 70% of student achievement. In contrast, when using student data, we can only explain about 50%. Also, the predictive validity of the different predictors does depend on the dataset used. That's most obvious when we look at the predictor parental support. Using parents' data, it is very predictive for student achievement. However, when using students' data or teacher data, parental support is almost not relevant for predicting student achievement. So we have similar pictures in other predictors. In total, this study and also the previous study shows that with regard to assessing not only perception but also the predictive validity of variables, different informats can lead to different results and thus to different conclusions. That leads to the discussion. To sum up, there are large differences in the assessment of school quality between school leaders and teachers. This indicates either measurement error or perspective validity. Future studies are needed to clarify which one is the case, and also future studies are needed to get more information what is actually meant by the specific perspective validity. What we also did see in our study is that the agreement or the degree of agreement between school leaders and teachers does strongly depend on the dimension of school quality. So future studies should make an attempt to explain or to find predictors on the extent of the agreement. And finally, I want to point out limitations. We only use cross-sectional data, so it's not possible to draw causal conclusions. And unfortunately, the data is not representative of the population. So we should be cautious when drawing or deriving general implications and conclusions. And nevertheless, I would argue that these studies show that we as researchers have to be more explicit about the informants that we used and to think more about the limitations. So a more explicit reflection of our samples is needed, not only in scientific papers, but also when we report research to the public. And what I think is even more needed is to inform educational policy and practice more often about the limitations of single informant studies. I think we entirely miss that at the moment, or so far. And that's even more relevant if educational policy or practitioner want to do or have to do high stakes decisions. Thanks a lot for your attention. If you're interested in the papers that we already have published, and if you're interested in discussing the topic, I'm happy if you drop me an email.